Sasha-Ann Simons. It's Friday at noon, so it's time for our weekly news recap, where we take a deep dive into the biggest state and local stories.
Governor J.B. Pritzker and his Republican challenger, Darren Bailey, facing off for the final time before Election Day.
I'm running to restore hope to all the good people in Illinois.
I've done my job so working families can do theirs.
Bailey reporting that after the debate, he received a $2 million donation from Republican megadonor Richard Uihlein.
I'm very pleased about the progress that we've made in our state.
Friends, life is worse today than it's ever been in Illinois.
We've got a lot to talk about. Our panel today is TIna Sfondeles, chief political reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Welcome back, Tina.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Also here, Jacoby Cochran, host of CityCast Chicago. That's a daily podcast and newsletter about all things Chicago. Great to see you again.
Hey, I'm excited to be back.
And we've got Ray Long, investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Ray is also the author of The House That Madigan Built, the record run of Illinois' Velvet Hammer. Good to have you here.
Hey, always good to be here. Thank you, Sasha.
Plus, if you are online right now, a reminder that we are on Facebook. We're on YouTube. You can check it out either now or later at your own convenience. So I'm going to start with you, Tina. The midterm election, that's just over 2 weeks away. My gosh, we're getting so close. The candidates for governor, they had their final debate this week on Tuesday. What were the highlights?
The highlights were both were very prepared. If you saw that first one, you could see Bailey was maybe a little bit more prepared than Pritzker, which was surprising to some. Bailey called Pritzker too extreme. Pritzker called Bailey too extreme, and Bailey said that Pritzker's too woke. So you got both sides of the coin. It was very fast-paced. There were a lot of interjections from Bailey. There was a shushing from the moderator, little fights. You could tell the types of issues that kind of made them upset. It was a good overview for voters who are maybe unsure, but it seems to be that there are just those two sides, far right, far left, and not a lot in the middle.
Great overview, and we're going to dig into some of those moments that you alluded to there, but burning question for me, folks. Anyone feel like they learned something new about either candidate at the debate? I'm looking at you, Jacoby and Ray.
No, I mean, they ended with appreciation, one for, marrying their high school sweetheart. The other, Bailey said, take me shoe shopping. And so they tried to find some way to give some props to the other one. But I didn't, right? Governor Pritzker has been invested in this message of Darren Bailey, both for months and months, but financially as well. He actually put money into showcasing to Illinois just how extreme he feels like he is. And so in many respects, both feel like they know who their opponent is. They've got their talking points ready, and they're going to stick pretty closely to the script.
Yeah. What do you think, Ray?
Well, Pritzker put in tens of millions of dollars to back Bailey's campaign so he could get the candidate that he wanted. So he's got the candidate he wanted. It's Pritzker's to lose right now. What I took out of the debate is that nobody really had a knockout punch. And so I would agree that the most illuminating thing was, that Darren Bailey actually realizes that he needs better suits.
Well, he's also just kind of tamping down his positions from the primary. I asked the governor a question after the debate about, are you seeing a primary Bailey and a general election Bailey? And you 100% are, because he does not want to talk about abortion. He does not want to talk about Trump.
That's true.
That's the thing that people probably learned at that debate.
So Pritzker portrayed Bailey as an extremist, as you mentioned, Tina. He called him a, quote, threat to democracy. He repeatedly tried to link Bailey to Trump. Let's just listen to one example.
I want to point out that Darren Bailey has surrounded himself with racist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic people and organizations, including chasing after the chief among them, Donald Trump.
So Bailey was asked repeatedly whether he would support Donald Trump if he ran for president. What did he say?
He basically said, we don't know who's running. I'm not going to comment on that.
Skated around that question.
That is not the same as what you saw a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was begging for that nomination on all fours practically at one point. Now it seems like he back on the fence, kind of biding his time. But as we said, that was always the strategy.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, Jacoby, that voters are actually swayed by these debates?
No, I think voters have made their minds up already.
Seems pretty late.
Yeah, I want people who maybe feel disillusioned by this process, who think, as Ray said, that Pritzker's got it in the bag. It's easy to turn away. But a lot of these efforts that Bailey and the far right are pushing for, they're both on the ballot and off the ballot. And so a lot of these measures are picking up steam, whether we're talking about anti-inclusive education or book bans or, still trying to roll back health care for women. And so, we got to pay attention to this race, but also recognize that what they believe in goes much further down the line.
Mm-hmm. And Ray, Darren Bailey also portrayed Governor Pritzker as an extremist. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Chicago is the nightmare called Pritzkerville, and it's still 2 weeks from Halloween.
That did not really do anything but hit with a thud. I didn't think it sounded anything more than something that he had practiced on and couldn't wait to get in.
Yeah. He thought he ate.
Yeah. I think what's also interesting here, to pick up on what Jacoby was saying, is that there is this line of belief in some of the polls, some of the national polls, that suggest that Republicans are now independents are now starting to lean toward Republicans, which is an interesting factor in other states. I don't think it'll be enough to create a wave for Bailey in Illinois, of course, but I do think that more people are starting to tune in.
Well, Darren Bailey is also trying to tie Pritzker to embattled former House Speaker Mike Madigan. He had new charges brought against him last week. Tell us how that's impacting Democrats right now.
Well, Democrats who love to take Madigan's cash and love to have his backing over the years are now acting like Madigan who? I mean, what is this? Who is this guy? But I didn't have anything to do with it, even though their bank accounts may say otherwise. And so they have to still deal with this Madigan baggage. Republicans believe that is an albatross that they can hang around the neck of any opponent and take some votes away from them. And because of the negative ads that are out there now, a lot of people think they can make hay out of it, and they're trying real hard.
Yeah, they just seem, Tina, to just have wildly different perspectives on the state of our state.
Bailey and Pritzker?
Yeah.
They do. But it's also, as an incumbent, Pritzker has to defend what he's done. It's pretty easy to hit an incumbent. There's always something you can point out that they've done
that
wrong.
They've missed. Yeah.
And that's something that Bailey did well during that debate, talking about veterans who died of COVID. I mean, everyone cares about that. That's a family member. So he was able to kind of get those good hits on an incumbent.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and we are going behind the headlines on the weekly news recap with TIna Sfondeles of the Chicago Sun-Times, Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune, and Jacoby Cochran of CityCast Chicago. A reminder, you can watch us do this weekly news recap live on the WBEZ Facebook as well as the YouTube pages. You can also chat me in the chat box, and I might just read your questions or your comments on these stories on air. So sticking with you, Tina, the same day as the debate, Republican candidate Darren Bailey got his biggest campaign donation. From whom?
Mr. Dick Uihlein, his
of course.
Best friend. He did get $2 million, and
a lot of money.
There was an email that went out before the debate saying that he was going to match dollars up to $2 million to Bailey supporters. So he's given about $4 million, I believe. I'm sorry. There's a super PAC that he's given $42 million to, and this year he's given $12 million total primary and general to Bailey. So he's been giving more money to the super PAC, which we are going to be stuck with for months because they will be running ads after the general election.
That's right.
About the mayoral election. We've already seen those. Lori Lightfoot is definitely getting hit by the super PAC. So we will see this for months to come.
Well, Dick Uihlein doesn't just give to Illinois candidates, right? He's spreading these donations across the country. So let's talk about that. The candidates he's choosing to support, they have something in common.
Yes, they do. So I did a story about that he gave more than $6 million to Republicans who did not vote to certify the election, and also separately election deniers. And so if you look at the numbers, it's about 9 of every $10 of money that he's given to congressional candidates fit into this category. I did reach out to his spokesperson. They were going to maybe say something, then they didn't. So I got a no comment. But if you just look at the numbers, you see.
What do the numbers suggest, Tina?
The numbers suggest that he supports election denying candidates.
Mm-hmm. Are you surprised at all, Jacoby, by how many election denier candidates are on the ballot nationally?
No, not at all.
You got the Republican candidate for governor in Arizona, candidates running for Secretary of State in New Mexico, Arizona as well, Nevada. No surprises.
I'm not shocked. I think one thing that, was mentioned earlier is how people change from the primary to the general. But what the primary consistently showcases is there is a base for this information, this misinformation. There's a base who supports anti-vax rhetoric. There's a base who supports, that the election was stolen. There's a base for whom all of these fallacies they hit for, that this is what they get up for. They share this in their friend groups and their family groups. These are the discussions they'll be having at the holiday. And when you look at politicians as people who are playing the game, essentially, I mean, people aren't going to leave votes on the table. And if that requires radical views, then people are clearly willing to participate in them and then walk them back in some cases like Bailey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. Ray, following up on all that, can you just shed some light for us on what Illinois Republicans are calling, quote, election integrity efforts?
Yeah, there's a lot of effort here by the GOP hierarchy, including Bailey and Don Tracy, the chair of the GOP party. What they're shooting for is to try to, make people believe that there are big amounts of fraud out there, that the fraud goes back to the days of the cemetery voting that we used to hear here in Chicago, and that it's still present. Well, Rick Pearson did a great story on that for us, and he quoted Matt Dietrich, the State Board of Elections spokesman, who's on top of this and a straight shooter, and he said there's no evidence of it. So the idea is to stir the pot and to create doubt. It comes out of the Trump Roger Stone playbook to try to talk about how we're winning when we're actually losing. And so this is just one more way they're trying to put people around the state who can watch the polls and who are under that same belief.
Before we wrap this section of the recap, Tina, any other statewide races make news this week?
I'm not sure. Well, we did have today, which you just heard, that Obama endorsed Pritzker just now in a very nice ad, 30-second ad that's going to be airing on Statewide starting tonight. And he did vote on Monday.
That's right.
With Michelle. So.
Yeah, which we'll get into a little bit later. Ray, Jacoby, have you seen anything notable going on in any of the races?
I mean, Attorney General Tom DeVore continues to. How many times did he sue throughout the pandemic to ban masks, to ban vaccines? He continues to spread misinformation across social media, which I think is a whole nother conversation of these companies being held accountable for the spread of this misinformation. But again, regardless of if DeVore wins or not, the amount of money that are behind these fringe thoughts, right? I saw something in the Tribune earlier that said, like, election deniers, like, you can point back to the 50s and the 60s where these conspiracy theories were fraught. But now you're seeing millions of dollars being invested behind the perpetrators of these lies and these falsehoods. And that is not potentially, it's more dangerous than ever before. So I tend not to be about hyperbole, right? But it really is at a boiling point.
What's on your radar, Ray?
I can pick up on that. Tom DeVore put out a tweet this week that he said that he attached a Tribune headline to, and it was, the headline was, in the month since COVID-19 boosters, the most latest round that we're supposed to be taking, only 10.5% of eligible Illinoisans have gotten them. So that suggests there's a fatigue. That's what the doctors are saying. Hey, not everybody's tuned into that. I've gotten already 3 or 4, and
there's definitely a push to try to get folks to get the shot.
Tom DeVore put out a tweet that said the people aren't fooled any longer. You now see how small of a segment of society buys into J-Bub's nonsense, meaning J.B. Pritzker. And so he's trying to take some fact and twist it through a lens that is not on target and doesn't fit the facts. And so that just goes to show that there are just reams of misinformation out there, and it's an attack on the truth, and we have to stand for the truth.
Reams
and you
of
have
misinformation and billions of dollars.
Yes, and people can proliferate it through Twitter too. So it's really something that you have to pay attention to.
Let's take a very quick pause here. That is Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune. We've got TIna Sfondeles of the Chicago Sun-Times and Jacoby Cochran of CityCast Chicago. They're going to stick around, and we hope that you will too, because there's more news to get to. But first, advocates for athletes are going after the NCAA. Here's Lisa with more.
Hey, Sasha. So an organization calling for reform in college sports has filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice against the NCAA. It's the National College Players Association. It accuses people involved with the governing body of NCAA of violating antitrust laws by capping compensation for athletes. The NCPA has been leading the charge for college football and basketball players to receive a share of the millions of dollars in revenue their sports generate for more than a decade. Now, a complaint doesn't actually ensure an inquiry by the Justice Department. The personal health information of up to 3 million patients in Illinois and Wisconsin might have been exposed to outside companies through some tracking technology used on a large hospital system's electronic health records website. Advocate Aurora Health operates 27 hospitals and issued a statement saying the breach might have exposed information including medical providers, type of appointments, or medical procedures for some patients. The system blamed the breach on its use of computer code that collects information on how users might interact with a website. It's 12:21 and this is WBEZ.
A new documentary looks at Tanya Tucker's country music comeback after linking up with musician Brandi Carlile.
She was young when she started. She's young now. We have her here. Let's stop screwing around. Let's make sure we get out and see her play because she built us.
I'm Elsa Chang. More on the return of Tanya Tucker this afternoon on All Things Considered.
That's today at 3 o'clock on 91.5 WBEZ.
When your organization or business partners with WBEZ as a corporate sponsor, listeners understand your commitment to the community. Corporate sponsorship of WBEZ can support your business while supporting regional reporting. Information at wbez.org/sponsor.
WBEZ is supported by Rouse Center for the Arts, presenting its Artist in Residence Bourbon Country on October 22nd, where it delivers a classic rock genre complemented by country music. Tickets are at rousecenter.org. Also by the Newberry Consort, presenting Madama Europa at the Gonzaga Court with music that tells the story of the 16th century Jewish singer Europa Rossi, October 28th to the 30th. Tickets are at newberryconsort.org. Got sports tonight. I've got the Bulls are in Washington playing the Wizards. Tip-off is at 6. The Blackhawks at home against Detroit. It's their home opener, 7:30 face-off. And the Wolves are at Allstate Arena hosting Manitoba. It's 12:23. Beautiful day going up to 73. This is WBEZ.
Back now with more Reset. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. We are in the middle of our weekly news recap, so let's jump right back into those headlines.
Mayoral challenger Sophia King unveils her plan to reverse a spike in violent crime.
Safety is obviously Chicago's biggest challenge. It's this mayor's biggest failure, and it will be my number one priority.
18th Ward Alderman Derek Curtis accidentally shot himself in the wrist while cleaning his gun.
Cook County Treasurer Maria Pappas and her team want to stop investors from taking advantage of an Illinois law that she says is draining tens of millions of dollars every year away from minority communities.
Our panel today is TIna Sfondeles of the Chicago Sun-Times, Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune, and Jacoby Cochran of CityCast Chicago, the newsletter and podcast. All right, over to you, Ray. This week, two former investigative reporters for the Tribune, they made headlines for their work at the Cook County Treasurer's Office. Fill us in.
Yeah, it's really a remarkable thing. Maria Pappas has hired Todd Leidy and Hal Dardick, and she has turned them loose on her office, basically. And she had them focus on something that has the arcane name of sales in air. And what that basically...
Sales in error?
Yeah.
What is that, Ray?
Oh, thank you.
Can you
thank
explain
you
it
so
to
much.
us?
I've been working on this for my PhD.
You've got your term paper here,
You
so
went to
please.
class last night.
Well, basically in theory, and let me just cite the article here that was done in the Trib. Tax sales are supposed to be beneficial, right? And governments are supposed to get money back from these tax sales, but people don't pay their taxes. Others look to invest in it. And this has become a kind of cottage industry among people who are not really doing what the law should be doing, which is to help government get their money from the tax rolls. And what is happening is big investors, including private equity firms and hedge funds, are buying up properties that are delinquent on their taxes, and then when the people who owe the taxes don't pay for a while, they owe interest, and then basically a lot of these investors then scoop up the interest, and then the people pay their overall tax bill and they get their property back. But it's turned into a major snafu. And what has happened is that they've figured out how to wiggle out of some of these purchases, and there are hundreds of millions over the last 7 years that have not gone to local property tax entities like your school, like your local government, like your libraries, like your fire departments. And so Pappas is now calling for some reforms that could shore that up so that there's less leakage from the property tax bills.
Boy, that was complicated. So tax buyers, they can get out of a property tax purchase for clerical errors too? Like, so if your street name is misspelled, for instance?
Yes. They've tried to do that and tried to wiggle out, and there have been numerous examples of how they've been able to do that so that they don't have to get stuck with a property, et cetera.
Yeah. But one thing I'm interested in with this story is just that idea of investigative reporters being hired by government officials to do work like this. Is that common for journalists to do that?
Well, I think journalism is going through this big change right now where in the Tribune's case, we're bought by a hedge fund, and there were opportunities to leave or opportunities to go to better pay. And in some cases, some Tribune reporters have taken buyouts. I can't remember if Todd and Hal did, but the reality is that they used their incredible skills. I miss them every day. And they were able to get an inside look that reporters would never get if they were going up to any public office and trying to get a deep dive. And they were able to do a super deep dive because they had the cooperation of the office.
Yeah. Jacoby and Tina, I mean, newsroom employment has actually declined by more than a quarter since 2008, if you can believe that. That's numbers from the Pew Research Center. And I wonder if you think that we'll see this sort of thing happening, where journalists are just applying their skills to other jobs moving forward.
I mean, there definitely seems like opportunities, even just in my short time getting on this side of the glass of Chicago's media landscape.
True, yeah.
I've already seen people move from organizations, move out of journalism. And so people want to feel valued. They want to feel like their work is, not simply for a headline that someone might skip over, a headline that they themselves may not have even written. So I know, people are looking for opportunities. Like my man Evan Moore would tell me, I'm trying to check that bag too.
Yeah. What do you think, Tina? What have you been seeing around you?
Well, I do think just like a lot of professions, the pandemic changed a lot of the journalism landscape. People did leave their jobs. I did. I came back to my old job very happily. So people kind of took a look at their life to see like, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be with? I have a coworker tell me they appreciate me once a week. This is like a real story. So, I mean, you go to a workplace where you feel appreciated. So you might see people jumping around to find that.
Yeah.
This is Reset. We are going behind the headlines on the weekly news recap with TIna Sfondeles of the Chicago Sun-Times, Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune, and Jacoby Cochran of CityCast Chicago. A reminder, you can watch us on the WBEZ Facebook and YouTube, and you can also talk to us right now in the YouTube chat box. And I just may read your comments on the air, like what Shamrock Bloom had to say. Jacoby is awesome.
Thank you.
You've got a fan.
It.
You got a fan, and I think people are loving my little scarf, my WBEZ scarf. So, I wore it just for you.
Where's the box that those are sitting in the back? I know they're around. Don't play
this
me.
Was made for me.
Nah, come
Sorry.
on. Don't want
No more left. So, Tina, let's go to an aldermanic roundup. I want to start with mayoral candidate Sophia King, who represents the 4th Ward on the city's south side. She laid out her crime-fighting strategies this week. What in the world is she proposing?
So she is one of 8 people so far running. People are still getting petitions. I live in Logan Square. The farmers market has everyone if you want to sign petitions. Some candidates are struggling to get them. But so her plan is a little different than what Mayor Lightfoot has done so far, and she wants to bring out 1,000 retired Chicago police officers. She wants to use these crime-fighting drones to get people in police chases. They would identify the location, and then the cops would come and get them.
The fact that you said that without a smile breaking out your
I
face.
did quote.
I'm like, she's not going to just go slide over crime-fighting
drones. And also adding 200 detectives. So as I said, this is different than what Lightfoot has done. She also wants to change the work week. As we've seen, there have been all these horrible, cop suicides, medical issues, all sorts of things happening in the past couple of years. So there's a big focus on how many hours should these police work. Hers is actually a lot longer than the mayor's. She wants 10-hour days, 4 days a week, and the regular is right now is 3 8-hour shifts.
10-hour days, 4 days a week. That's
right,
not gonna
just
go over
showing that we need people crime fighting.
Yeah,
is what she's trying to show.
Why the fists?
I don't know. It was supposed to be quotes
for the crime fighting
for the video.
Thoughts, gentlemen?
One that I saw in there that really caught my attention was, I believe not only are they offering signing bonuses, but a $10,000 down payment if you're a first-time home buyer. I mean, it seems like we got innovative strategies for bringing people to come work for city institutions. I feel like there are millions of Chicagoans who might be more interested in city jobs. CTA is trying to hire. The Chicago Park District and pools are trying to hire. They want more teachers to stay in the city. Maybe start using some of these strategies that y'all using for CPD, because I'm hearing crime fighting strategies that are going to come through the police force. But then at the same time, Sophia King is using her $100,000 micro grant to invest in private security in her ward, which to me communicates that, police do not keep us safe. And so we're moving to alternative methods. So when both are getting money, it kind of feels like we're kind of just, tossing money off the side of the road.
Well, you mentioned that private security in Bronzeville there. Give us some more detail there, Jacoby.
So the plan is that a neighborhood group is coming together with a private security group in the so the office will collaborate with ex-cons for community and social change and Halo Security Group. And Sophia King is going to use the $100,000 micro grant that all the alder people were given to use at their own discretion to invest in private security. Now, let me say this straight up. I understand that, communities from Logan Square to Bronzeville to Lakeview, everyone has been, concerned about public safety and what are ways that we can invest to keep our communities thriving, to feel safe as we walk up and down the street. And private security is one of the first things that people reach for. My question is, well, if we know that we need to invest in alternative methods to policing, how are we also looking at a budget that sees policing financing going up? How are the strategies for, improving public safety, continuing to invest in, carceral models of safety, but at the same time saying, well, communities need to be responsible for keeping themselves in a way that isn't necessarily community policing, but private security. And that concerns me, because when you're somebody who lives between Hyde Park, who finds themselves on 47th Street, I'm already worried about being profiled by the people for whom my tax dollars fund, AKA the police. But this micro grant is also my tax dollars. And so I'm now potentially going to be profiled by private security and my neighbors inside of my neighborhood. And so I don't see how I, as a citizen moving to Chicago, benefit from this on a daily basis.
Such a good point. Jumping to our friends over at YouTube, Angela says, seeing police all over the place makes me more nervous. Police themselves seem plenty violent. And she also says, in regard to Sophia King's plan, crime-fighting drones sounds like they have their own moral compass and agenda.
Yeah, that sounds like the plot from Far From Home.
There's also some privacy issues there, too.
Huge privacy issues. Drones. Yeah, no, I hear that folks are sounding off here on YouTube. Shamrock says we need to invest in education, not private security in neighborhoods that can afford it.
Yep.
Thoughts, Ray?
Well, it's a tough issue that many mayors have wrestled with, obviously. And we've seen so many issues here that have grown in proportion under the Lightfoot administration. And it's also happening around the country. But it also strikes me that another piece of this equation may be to look at the private security and whether those are cops who are working extra time, and then they're spreading themselves thin, and then they could be on a short fuse as a result of that. So it's hard to say, hey, you can take this cop job and then you can also be a private security person. Maybe there would be even more people doing that if they had 3 days off a week.
Shamrock Bloom says crime-fighting drones wouldn't prevent the killing of Adam Toledo by a Chicago police officer. I don't get it.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. Well, Jacoby, over to 42nd Ward Alderman Brendan Riley, who warned about the possibility of fraud in the city's gas and venture card giveaway. What happened there? What did he say?
I definitely took this warning with a grain of salt. For people who may not be familiar, back in April, City Council voted pretty close, 26-23, to pass the gas giveaway and venture card giveaway. I actually believe Sophia King was the only person who wasn't able to vote because she had COVID-19 at the time.
Oh, okay.
So just an interesting link there. But even then, Alderman Riley was not one of the people who voted for this, practically labeling it a giveaway. And so we saw 50,000 gas cards, 100,000 venture cards given out. And now Riley came back during the city council budget hearing in which the inspector general was attending and said, we should maybe investigate this from fraud because someone in my ward came up and said they were able to use this at a Walgreens to get $50 or $60 extra, or, they were able to load more on a venture card. And I'm going to just say it. I don't care that people who need money for transportation were able to get a couple extra bucks for some extra items. And I think Riley drawing attention to this definitely means that people who have otherwise maybe discarded those cars, thrown them in the trash, are probably rifling through their junk drawer right now trying to see if they can go take that card to get a little extra $50 or $60. And so we know that the people who ultimately got these were the most vulnerable people in our city, the people who needed extra cash at a time in which, they couldn't sit in those long Willie Wilson lines, right?
Yeah.
For gas and groceries. And so I'm not really with, kind of painting a broad strokes picture of the people who receive them as potential perpetrators of fraud. I don't think it helps to uplift the most vulnerable amongst us.
Well, sticking with you, I want to head to the Southwest side. 18th Ward Alderman Derek Curtis also made news this week. What are the details there?
Interestingly enough, Derek Curtis during committee did not vote for the gas giveaway until his Southwest side neighborhoods were included in it. So when it got to the full council, he did vote for it. Well, he was in the news this week, unfortunately, because according to his statement, the alderman was helping a neighbor clean and repair a small gun that was malfunctioning at the range. And while reassembling the gun, it went off and Curtis was allegedly hit in the wrist. He was taken to the hospital and is in good condition.
So he shot himself in the hand.
That is what he is saying. Accidental deaths cost hundreds, maybe even thousands of lives every single year across the nation. And so I don't want to, take this in any joking matter. But I do want to say, in a way that I hope doesn't sound like I'm blaming a victim, is I don't know that much about guns. But having one in the chamber as you're reassembling a gun, that was malfunctioning. And again, I'm not sure at what angle the gun was being held to. It just seems like, as somebody who was somebody who is licensed to teach concealed carry, that there may have been some ways to prevent this. And so I just hope that rather than becoming a meme on the internet, it is another lesson for people who choose to own guns in their home, who choose to come in contact with guns, that safety and proper usage has to be at the utmost on your mind. And so again, to Curtis, to his family members, I'm sure, who are shaken by this, I wish him a speedy
Any idea
recovery.
how he's doing?
I do not know. From the statement, it did look like he wanted to push the attention away from the incident to also focus on some of the policies that he stands on, particularly gun prevention. Again, this situation, I fear, is rife for kind of making its way through the Twitterverse and coming back out a lot less serious. But, I hope people see it as a moment of caution.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of serious, I mean, it could have been a lot worse.
Exactly. Oh, of course.
And
exactly.
So you gotta thank God that it wasn't worse than that. And that's what we see with a lot of these incidents that you talk about, where accidental deaths become tragedies.
Folks on YouTube saying we need gun safety legislation.
We do. I don't know exactly how gun legislation would have helped in his, neighborhood, in his friend's home, putting together a gun. but we definitely need to mandate that people are at least putting themselves in the best positions possible.
Mm-hmm. That is Jacoby Cochran, host of the podcast CityCast Chicago. We've got TIna Sfondeles, who's chief political reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, and Chicago Tribune investigative reporter Ray Long. They're going to stick around because there is, believe it or not, more news. More news to get to, folks. We want you to stick around as well. But first, Wall Street, it's on track for a winning week. Here's Lisa with more.
Yeah, that's kind of novel. Stocks rose on Wall Street today, keeping major indexes on track for weekly gains after a lot of days of up and down trading. Tech and healthcare stocks had some of the strongest gains today. Social media companies, though, are broadly lower after the Washington Post reported Elon Musk plans to slash about 3/4 of the payroll at Twitter after he buys the company. A judge this morning has sentenced former Trump political advisor Steve Bannon to 4 months in prison and a $6,500 fine for criminal contempt of Congress. The judge says he is prepared to let Bannon remain free while Bannon appeals his convictions on 2 misdemeanor counts, as he is unlikely to flee or pose a danger to the community. The plastics industry says there is a way to help solve the crisis of plastic waste plaguing the ocean, beaches, and lands across the globe, a form of recycling where plastics are melted down into an oil-like mixture and then shipped to factories where they're then made back into raw plastic. Environmental groups say this kind of advanced recycling is not going to solve the plastics problem and will continue to enable the steep ramp-up of global plastics production. It is 12:41 WBEZ.
Coming up on the next Science Friday, researchers are finding connections between climate extremes and societal conflict.
We see these looking back hundreds or thousands of years, and we certainly see them in more recent periods.
How else will global warming shape our behavior? That's on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
Science Friday, today at 1 on WBEZ Chicago.
Peter Sagal here from Wait, Don't Tell Me with a reminder that you can support public radio by giving a large gift, a gigantic one you might not be able to afford. Or instead, you could donate a vehicle you no longer need. Your choice.
Find out how at WBEZ.org/car.
WBEZ is supported by the U Chicago Harris School of Public Policy, hosting Why We Fight, Gun Violence, Interventions, and the Cost of Conflict on October 26th. Registration is at harris.uchicago.edu/HPF. And support is provided by Northeastern Illinois University, presenting Nobuntu. The 5-part a cappella ensemble performs a fusion of Zimbabwean-rooted music, Afro-jazz, and more today at eiu.edu/tickets. And WBEZ is supported by Indeed. More information is at indeed.com/credit. 64 degrees, going up to 73. Yes, please. This is WBEZ.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. If you're just tuning in, it's our weekly news recap where we dig into the top local stories. Here to help, TIna Sfondeles of the Chicago Sun-Times, Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune, and Jacoby Cochran of the CityCast Chicago podcast and newsletter. Before the break, we took a look at what's been happening in the city council this week, but believe it or not, even more news happened. So back over to you, Jacoby. I want to dive into the Cook County Guaranteed Income Program because tonight is the deadline, 11:59 p.m. to apply. More than 200,000 people so far have applied. There are only 3,250 spots. Remind us of the basics of this program and how it's going to work.
Yeah, people who meet a certain income threshold will be able to apply for this money, and through the lottery system, like you said, about 3,200 will be selected to get $500 a month, no strings attached, for the next 2 years, which I want to remind people is different from the Chicago Guaranteed Income Pilot Program, which selected about 5,000 people to get $500 a month for the next year. So there are two separate programs, which when they were announced kind of had that like political vibe to it. Like Lori Lightfoot was like, this is going to be the biggest ever. And Tony Preckwinkle came out and was like,
this is the biggest ever.
This one is the biggest ever.
It's a Kanye West, Taylor Swift moment, right?
But to put these numbers into perspective for people, if we stay at like 206,000 or even jump it up to 210,000, that means that less than 1.5% of all the applicants are going to get picked. And that really makes me question these programs, not their benefit, not how much people need them, but their overall effectiveness, right? Similar to the gas giveaway and every other social safety network that we have, it's never enough. And we already know that people need this money, right? We need decades more social science research to tell us that when people get extra money, they use it to sustain themselves and their family. And so I'm not really sure what more we're going to learn from these programs. And so I think we need to get more innovative at the local and federal level. We need more pilot programs that have a longer time span, right? We need more stimulus checks. We need to enforce stronger corporate taxation and funnel that money into social services. We need to increase wages, universal, right? These pilot programs aren't going to fix generations of, wage inequality. And so we need to get bigger and better at this, because I feel bad for the hundreds of thousands of people who go through all of the necessary steps to apply. Some people have to go to classes to learn how to apply, to be told, no, you didn't get picked for the first one earlier this year. You're not getting picked for this one.
Because you have to do it online, right?
Right.
The application. I spoke with Toni Preckwinkle last week on Reset, and she was very adamant that this is going to go beyond just being a pilot period, right? So after the 2 years, they are dedicated to making it permanent. Remind us how folks get to be a part of this program. Is it through a lottery?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how any of the lotteries, Illinois, whether it's income pilot, whether it's you can open a weed shop tomorrow. I'm not really sure how they all work. But 3,250 people will be picked from the demographic numbers they've pushed out. A large number of the people who are applying are women. A lot of those are women of color, women who have children, people who are head of their household. And so we know that the people who are going to get it are going to need it. And 9 out of 10 times, they're going to use it in a way that helps to push their family forward. I saw people saying they wanted to finish community college classes. That'll be extra groceries. That'll mean they can get their car fixed. And so I can't help but feel like dangling money in front of oppressed people who are living up against the forces of capitalism and poverty. Like, what more do you need to know? So that's how I feel at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, speaking of wages and income, I want to get an update on a story that we've covered here on Reset as well. That's unionization at Starbucks, Ray.
Right.
Some news about a cafe in Edgewater?
Right. A Starbucks in Edgewater was announced it's going to close, and it just so happened, coincidence, whether you believe it or not, I have to question it at this time. The workers there were talking about unionizing. And so this is kind of another black eye for Starbucks, which has kind of built itself with this image of, hey, Seattle, we're cool, we're the big Northwest type of universe that everybody thinks about everybody else. Well, that's not what this kind of signal is giving people here. That it looks like, and it gives the image of, whether Starbucks says it is so or not, it gives the image that they're cracking down on unionization, and these are people who are just trying to get a living wage.
Yeah. Well, another topic that we've been talking about on the show is the surge in a scam called check washing, Tina. Thieves were stealing checks in the mail and then chemically erasing the details and then filling in their own details and cashing in. So 5 people were charged in a crackdown in this scam. Give us the rest of the details there.
It's called Operation Broken Arrow, which is a good name for an operation.
All right.
But it is not just the check washing. It's also burglarizing mailboxes, having keys. So imagine someone just being able to open a mailbox, taking whatever they want. Wow. And a lot of people, we pay our bills obviously online or on the phone, but there are people who use checks. And so a colleague of mine, Dave Stewart, wrote a story about a Southwest Side couple who wrote a $30 check to a school that was erased to $10,000 to some person that they've never met. And it took them a long time to get the money back. I think the bank said 6 months. I think our reporter contacted the bank, and I think that helped to speed it up. But imagine being out of $10,000 for over 6 months.
My goodness.
So it's a new thing. It's not a new thing. Rather, it's gotten worse during the pandemic. And I guess there's been about 17,000 cases in Illinois so far this year. So it is something that the feds are watching, is one of the things that they're really kind of trying to get more people on, because it's scary. Mail should be a trusted situation. And in this case, it hasn't been.
Well, a question from YouTube. Will anyone track how money is spent?
With the checks that were stolen?
Yeah.
I think that's a good question. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think the feds are probably, if they don't have the people who wrote the check, they are probably tracking the money to see how they can get them.
Well, Jacoby, another story. A lot of criminal activity has been going on near Wrigley Field over this past week. What's happening?
Yeah, from what I can understand, there were, I think, 5 or 6 instances where people were held at gunpoint, instructed to get inside of a waiting car, robbed of their belongings, and then dropped off at another location. To which, first, I'm glad that all of those people, are still here with us, that none of them were injured in gunfire. But I do, as somebody who has been robbed at gunpoint in my life, it's a trauma that doesn't easily wash off of you. It kind of stays with you. I find myself now to this day still having a slight level of paranoia that I move with. But one thing that I've tried to do in the aftermath is not to cast such a wide net. I got to look the person in the eyes. In this case, they did not, from what I understand, because the descriptions that they've given out have been so broad, something like 5'8" to 6 foot, black guy, 150 to 175
Dark
pounds.
clothing.
And while I only meet 2 of the 3 of those criteria, potentially, again, it's very similar to the conversation we were having earlier. I know that people want to feel safe in their community. I know that people don't want to run up against the risk of losing their life, losing their valuables. But again, I also fear of how we respond to these situations. And, for the 5'8" to 6 foot black guy, 150 to 175 pounds moving through Wrigley Field, I know there are more eyes on them today than there were yesterday or were last week. And there were already plenty of eyes as somebody like myself who moved through that neighborhood. And so I don't know where kind of where you find the balance of making sure people feel safe, whether, against crime or against being stereotyped. But I would just hope that we can find balance, some humanity in this narrative.
Well, Ray, do you think that these kinds of headlines are actually going to keep people from going to a Cubs game or visiting the bars in Wrigleyville?
I think people will be more cautious. I think there's a palpable feel in the city right now that people need to feel better about going out. They have to now think about whether or not they're going to have an extra wallet to give to the person who's sticking them up, or whether they just take their ID out instead of their credit cards, or they don't take a purse or something like that. And I do think that we will see, and we've already heard that there's going to be more cops in that area, but it's kind of like whack-a-mole, right? So you understand that there's a problem here, and you send a surge of cops, where we're trying to get some kind of balance here to keep it all under control in every neighborhood, because everybody deserves safety. It's a tough call, and I don't think it's going to mean there are fewer fans and they go to Cubs games. They go to Cubs games when they're losing. It's incredible.
Boy, that's true, too. Jacoby, the Obamas, they made a surprise visit to Chicago this week. What were they doing?
It's never a surprise for the people who live by their house, right? I stay like 3-4 blocks away, so it's always very clear
and they're coming
when the former president and first lady are in town. But they were back here to vote, right? Michelle Obama, the former first lady, is getting geared up to go on a national book tour. President Obama is getting ready to go around the country stumping for very vulnerable candidates in the midterm election. And so they stopped by the super site downtown to cast their early ballots. But they also, the former president met with a panel of students. Io, the rookie who had an amazing start to the season in the first game against the Heat, was there as well. And then the First Lady, Michelle Obama, visited with some students at the school right across from where the Obama Center is currently being...
Hyde Park Academy.
Yeah, where the Obama Center is currently being constructed for some Obama Foundation events. Anytime they come to town, I'm always torn. I'm torn with most topics, if I haven't overused that phrase already.
Why?
Because on one hand, the nostalgia of seeing them move, and I hope this doesn't come off as ageist, I do not mean it, but with the last 2 administrations, you didn't get the same vibe of life, right? They're not filling out NCAA brackets. They're not, seeing them at the White House get their portraits up and how cute they were with each other, right? Yeah. That there was always a feeling of, despite them being the president and the first lady, there was a false sense of accessibility there, right? We know it's false, but it feels like they were people who can be touched. Right. And so Michelle Obama sitting down with these students to talk about some of the significant moments in her life, from facing racism as a child to navigating prestigious institutions, losing her father, being the first Black first lady to raise her children in the White House. It's so amazing to see that. But I will push back, right? The other side of the coin, right? The First Lady says something to the students of, you got to get active. You got to fight for yourself. The people who are out there trying to legislate your life out of, purview, they don't care about you. They don't see you. And I'll continue to challenge the former First Family to remember that these are their peers they're talking about, right? This is their generation that they're talking about. And so beyond just, early voting and political stumps and photo ops, I challenge them to push back against officials in this city and nationally, because I'd argue Black and brown children in Chicago are more policed, more scrutinized, and more disenfranchised than ever before. And so, I want them to continue to fight and to work tooth and nail to make sure that the sins of their peers, their colleagues, and their generations don't to continue to fall on the shoulders of the very children they sit and kind of powwow with.
Chat with, very good point. I want to share some good news with you, Tina.
Some good news.
Girl Scouts are involved.
Yes.
What did they announce?
Mackenzie Scott, who she broke
has
up,
a lot of money.
Has a lot of money. Has a lot of time.
I feel bad. Like that's kind of all I know. Yeah.
So she is
Jeff
Bezos's ex, and they split in 2019. And she has pledged to give it all away. She gave $4.2 million to the Girl Scouts. It's Chicago and Northwest Indiana. It's the largest contribution they've ever received.
$4.2 million.
I took a look at her little pledge. She has like a website giving pledge, and she says, "I will keep at it until the safe is empty."
Wow,
so that is a lot of money.
Which is going to be for
away, so
how many Girl Scout cookies could $4.2 million buy?
A lot. She has focused on women's issues, racial equity. So she is thoughtfully thinking about where to send her money.
Yeah. Thoughtful thoughts.
I bet they didn't. I bet that wasn't even her initial plan. I think they came to sell her cookies and they talked her out of a $80 million donation. She got a truckload of cookies and then she was like, "I'm gonna actually give to the Girl Scouts." Now y'all are real good salespeople.
Yeah,
some of the strongest I've ever seen.
All right, so 30 seconds here. I'm going to do quick hits around the room. What are you looking at next week? What are you keeping an eye on? You first, Tina.
I will definitely be on the campaign trail trying to track down Darren Bailey and J.B. Pritzker. I'll be watching all the money.
Why'd I even ask you?
All about
of course that's what you're doing. That's your life till November 8th.
Yes.
Jacoby.
Oh, I mean, at CityCast Chicago, we got some great episodes coming out for people. But to get the week started on a relaxing note, we're going to be looking at some of the best fall hikes around Chicago and around Midwest.
Sweet. And Ray?
Well, I'm going to be looking to see if there's anything in the statewide realm of the politics that I can sink my teeth into. But also, speaking of sinking my teeth into, I just bought a couple of cans of nuts from my favorite Girl Scout, Maggie Ray.
Hey. That is Chicago Tribune investigative reporter Ray Long, TIna Sfondeles of the Chicago Sun-Times, and Jacoby Cochran of CityCast Chicago. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
That's it for Reset. The show is produced by Meha Ahmed, Haima Domenici, Linnea Dominic, Brenda Ruiz, Micah Yason, Claire Hyman, Michael Liptrot, Andrea Guffman, and Andrew Merriweather. Dan Tucker's our executive producer. Ethan Schwab and Haley Bloomquist were our engineers this week. Monday on the show, $10 million is up for grabs in what's called the Chicago Prize. The reward is going to go to the group with the best plan for rebuilding their neighborhood. So we're going to talk to 6 finalists, hear their pitches and why they deserve this Chicago Prize, and maybe what plans they have for their community. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Thank you so much for listening and sticking with us here on Reset and joining us online. If you are online, have yourselves a wonderful weekend, and we'll meet again soon.